Every breath you take, every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I've been watching you. Every single day, every word you say, every game you play, every night you stay, I've been watching you. Oh, can't you see, you belong to me, and how my poor heart aches.
3, 2, 1, action.
So this no contact order was removed.
As the reality of the new situation began to actually sink in, I foolishly ignored the conditions of the no contact order. The conditions put on me were in vain. I wholeheartedly felt that Yvonne was in no way a victim. I knew that Yvonne had never been abused or assaulted by me in any way. I mistakenly thought Yvonne was generally trying her best to have the charges dropped and withdrawn. During this period, my good friend Joel received notice that our apartment lease would be expiring. And at this point, he had himself a new girlfriend and was really interested in rooming with her, which would have left me homeless. On top of that, Ian McAndrews, my lawyer at the time, had been given any and all my extra cash. Yvonne had invited me to stay with her. I agreed, all the while knowing I had a no contact order with Yvonne. Living there was stressful, crazy, and an idiotic manner. I was living with her while a court order to be nowhere near her hung over my head like an albatross. Even though the situation was crazy and dangerous, I really felt like I had zero other options. I was flat broke. I was hungry. I needed to keep my job. I needed somewhere to live. Some mornings, Yvonne would get a phone call while we're lazing in bed and during breakfast. She would answer the call and take the call to another room. I found this suspicious because normally she would take the call and chat wherever it was, in bed, in the car, while at work. But these calls, there was something different. She would take them in another room. Eventually, I casually asked her, "Who called?" Generally, she would attempt a lame, pathetic lie with, "Oh, it was so-and-so, blah, blah, blah." However, there was a time that I followed Yvonne out of the room and the phone's volume was so loud I could hear the most of the conversation. The clarion voice of Crown Counsellor Deborah Pope cut through the air and could be easily heard from across the room. She was calling Yvonne to give her notice about the upcoming first court appearance in May 2nd, 1999. My lawyer had also called me with the same information. The night before the first court appearance, when the charges would be made formal so that the trial could be set, Yvonne and I discussed how we'd be traveling up to Penticton where the trial would eventually be taking place. We found ourselves in a pickle and joked that obviously we couldn't drive up together. The serious nature of the no contact order made it impossible to even consider. My friend Sharon had agreed to drive me the 3 hours to the city of Penticton for the first appearance. Yvonne volunteered to me that her father would be driving her up to Penticton for the court appearance. Yvonne and I awoke together the next morning and had breakfast and said to each other that we'll see each other up in Penticton. I had Sharon pick me up at Yvonne's house. While my living at Yvonne's was a best kept secret, Sharon was a dear friend and understood my situation completely. Sharon and I had an uneventful drive to Penticton. We arrived early in the morning and ready for court. I met my lawyer at the courthouse and we entered the courtroom together. The minutes ticked by and the first appearance started. But Yvonne was a no-show. Eventually, the Crown told the judge that they needed to reschedule the first appearance date because Yvonne had strep throat and was admitted to the hospital. I knew that this was unequivocally false because the night before I was in bed at Yvonne's house fucking her, and I certainly didn't have strep throat. I told my lawyer that I knew for a fact that Yvonne was not sick, but I was reluctant to tell him how I knew, for obvious reasons. I asked him if he planned to present the court the 2 letters that Yvonne had written on my behalf explaining that there was no assault that took place and that she accepted responsibility for the current situation. For some reason unknown to me, he chose not to present to the court the letters, and he told me that they would have no value. At that point, the Crown stated to the judge that they wished to keep me and detain me in jail because it was claimed that I was harassing Yvonne. I was shocked. I'm floored by this new information, and it was in total contrast to the actual reality that I was living. Although I couldn't actually admit it, I was cohabitating with Yvonne. How could this be? My lawyer successfully argued on my behalf, and since I had no criminal record or any previous trouble with the police whatsoever, and combined with the fact I was employed full-time, the judge did not accept the Crown's wishes. The first appearance day was rescheduled, and Sharon and I headed back to Vancouver. I was profoundly confused and deflated. I used Sharon's phone to call Yvonne. I got no answer. It just went to Yvonne's answering machine. And in light of the new allegations made by the Crown against me, I certainly did not want to leave a voice message. I knew since Yvonne was not answering her calls, something was up. I certainly wanted to ask her about these new allegations and also why she told the Crown she was in the hospital sick with strep throat, when her and I both knew that this was bullshit. I was not able to make contact with Yvonne. But later that evening, I went to a very popular disco night hosted by a friend of mine. And holy shit, I saw Yvonne dancing there on the stage without a care in the world. I was in shock. She was shaking everything she had on stage with a drink in her hand. I hastily ran to the nearest convenience store and purchased a disposable camera and the day's newspaper, and I returned back to the club and took a photo of Yvonne while holding up the day's newspaper, showing the day's headlines, in order to prove that she wasn't sick and in fact was having a grand old time and was a Class A con artist. Due to the adrenaline rush, I stayed awake for the rest of the night until the post office opened, and I couriered the photos up to my lawyer, proving Yvonne was in no way sick. My lawyer responded by growling at me, "You watch too much goddamn TV, and you got no idea how the system works, do you?" Once again, I assure you this was not the last time. I was shocked beyond belief. I had irrefutable evidence that Yvonne was not sick and in hospital, and she could have testified easily and could have appeared in court, made answer for the charges hung around my neck like a stinking albatross. My retained lawyer definitely did not want to follow any of my advice or suggestions, but did casually say if I represented myself, I could use 100% of my evidence. Right. I looked him square in the eyes and said, return all my paperwork, documents, and letters and photos of Yvonne with the newspaper showing the date. He started to grab all the files and evidence into a pile on his desk. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Oh, thanks. By the way, you're fired."